Yeah, so thank you. I will give a short overview of our new weather stations and some first results from this large efforts that have been put over the last 2-3 years now within the SIOS and COAT project. The first of the stations was established here on Jansenhaugen inside the Adventdal in 2019. So we have more or less the same setup on all the stations with a 10-meter tower and a quite large number of parameters that are measured. So this is our kind of the main one of the main points here is that these stations are established for long-term monitoring. So hopefully this can be run for decades, and they are very part of the core of the monitoring program of COAT that Åshild talked about. And they also what we saw before we started is that we are missing a lot of information and knowledge about what's happening inside the valleys and in the higher areas on Svalbard. We need more and new knowledge on these climate gradients over the inner and high regions, especially on Nordensjøland, where we have this extensive biological monitoring, and where we have this quite poor observational base. So this and the last point is that the variability and long-term changes in climate are the most important drivers controlling the Arctic spices that Åshild now, an ecosystem that Åshild talked about. So here is an overview of the new stations marked in green, and also an overview of the existing weather station run by the Met Norway. There are also additional stations run by others, but I didn't include this on this map. But this shows nicely the current situation. If you look at the red dots, which are the existing stations before we established this new one, they are all located very close or at the coast. And now we have established new stations more into the valley system, or like here at Brøggerhalvøya, where we have this extensive monitoring going on for 20 years or so. So this really fills some important gaps in the monitoring on Svalbard. And we did before we established the station, we used the first part of the first field season to look for the best locations for each of the stations. We had some days going out in the field and trying to find the best location. And one of the elements was to looking after how with the foundation of the station, how should it be fixed to the ground, because you have a 10-meter tower. There's a lot of heavy wind, and there are also some frost activity, which means that there are some challenges establishing these high towers on Svalbard. So we were looking for large boulders. You can see two of these large blocks of boulders that Åshild is standing on here at Jansenhaugen and Reindalspasset. These two sites was chosen as the best locations for a weather station at these locations. And also in Isjørndalen, we also managed to find a big block that was weather station was fixed to. But for the other sites, there are more or less no big blocks, and we had to have a very different foundation with drilling machine and much more complicated instrument establishment. But we managed also for Nedre Sassendalen, Klauva, Kaffjøra, and Kvaduken to establish station, and then these were established during winter. And here is a picture of all stations which are up and running now. They are, as I said, built on the same with the same setup, same parameters. The first one was Jansen established in 2019, and the last one was established this spring or summer at Kvaløkken and Kaffeøra. Last spring and summer 2021. And here is the setup of the stations. We are measuring some of the standard parameters like air temperature and wind speed, humidity, pressure. But in addition to what was traditional measured on this automatic weather station on Svalbard, we also measure snow depth, radiation, soil temperature, and soil water content. And there are a lot of challenges from our own experience and other experiences over the last decades. We know that there are a lot of challenges, for instance, with the polar bears that should have been taken into account when we build and design this station. And also regarding power, we have to minimize the power consumption, and also these troubles with the foundation for the ground that really needs very stable and good foundation to have this station established. And normally we try to visit the station maybe once a year. So this is also a point that we really had to stay out for a long time of period without no inspection. And the communication and logistics is of course difficult in this, as all you know. So I just picked out some first data, and they have been running now for 2 or 3 years, almost the longest one. But some also have shorter than half or 8 months. But anyhow, it's interesting to start looking at these gradients, and then starting with the most easiest parameter, which is air temperature. Then we have a lot of existing stations located close to the coast. So if what I did here was to make a transect from SIOS-InfraNor in the west to Edgeøya in the east, and then in between we have all the new Coat stations located in Nordensjøland. And also some of the other stations like Svalbard Airport, Lufthavn, which is kind of a reference stations for a lot of research and other activity on Svalbard. And what you see here is this is just a monthly mean temperature of the last year. So from March last year to February this year, and just made a simple mean temperature for each month, and then we can really see the huge gradient, especially during winter, for instance, between the westernmost site at SIOS-InfraNor and compared to the more the inland valley sites like Reindalspasset, Nedre Sassendal, and also the higher locations. We also established this new station at Klaua, which is located at more than 400 meters above sea level, which really sticks out of the data, which has in some of the months the lowest, or most of the months the lowest mean temperature during this period. Even colder than Edgeøya, but Edgeøya is located at the sea level. So, but anyhow, there's a lot of interesting things coming out from this comparison, and we are working on this now and dig more into this data. And if you look at kind of a more south-north gradient, which also included two new stations at Kaffeøra and Kvaløkken, this is also interesting comparing to the reference station in Ålesund. We see this really gradients also here, also including the Polish station in Hornsund, that are quite strong differences, especially in some months. And if you look at, for instance, Akseløya, which are located in middle of in the fjord, we see for some months this have quite lower temperature than the others, probably due to local sea ice conditions. We just took out our sea ice map from yesterday or so, and we see that the sea ice cover is located now inside actually as a normal situation in February. And you can also see from the temperature that the local sea ice conditions also affected this gradient south-north. Another component which is important in Kuat is the snow cover. It's important for the vegetation and animals and the whole ecosystems. And so we have a lot of efforts now to monitor snowpack properties, measuring the thickness of basal ice during we have this rain on snow events or mild episodes during winter. So we have a fixed number of or a number of fixed points that are measured every year, and also in these points we also measure the soil temperature with small soil temperature loggers. And this setup is similar to what have been run for 10 or 20 years now by the Polar Institute, Norwegian Polar Institute, and others biologists around in Svalbard. But we also, during the Kuat project, we also established a pilot study in Adventdal, which really the weather stations are the core of the in the center of this study. But we have a distributed setup with trying to catch the spatial and temporal variability of the snow cover and how this affects the soil temperature around in Adventdal from the outermost part at Svalbard Airport to the inmost part around Jansen Avenue. So just some examples. We have this. We have the due to the operational setup, we also got this. We get this data in real time. So now we can also monitor and kind of monitor and follow the snow cover, snow depth development on each station. I just included Ny-Ålesund as well because they have a long record on snow depth measurements, and actually we see this winter have quite much snow this time of the year in Ny-Ålesund. So if you look at Kaffeøyra and Kvaduken, the snow depth at the moment is about between 30 and 40 centimeters at those sites close to the coast. And if you look more into the inland areas, we have, for instance, Vassendalen with a 30 centimeter, and Klauva, which is very wind exposed, is only 10 centimeters or so at the moment. And then also see at Reindalspass, the snow that is about 30 to 40 centimeters. So this is just one point, and around the weather stations we do this manual measurements each winter, which make a nice contribution to look at the spatial variability of snow cover. I just made a final graph looking at of the soil temperature. We are measuring soil temperature in different depths at each of the stations, and this really also showed quite strong variability between the stations, which kind of reflect both the snow cover situation, but also the soil type and soil humidity. So this will be a very good reference for the future when looking at this distributed network of soil temperature loggers that we have the weather stations, that kind of reference for this. So some more final slides. So as I said, we have this real-time data transfer now. So this is the traditional setup that we have on all our stations. So this means that all stations, when the measurements are done, you have the measurements are available for the whole world after a few seconds or minutes. And this ensures fast data access. For instance, in addition to the researchers like us, we have the operational weather and avalanche forecasting that really are using these new stations a lot, and the feedback is very good. And we have the local rescue service on Svalbard, which also have a new information now from the inland areas, and of course the general public in Longyearbyen and Ny-Ålesund and other areas. So, and some of you probably know that also the data are also a part of available, for instance, at Yr. So we can go into each station and look. I just took an example of wind. Look at the wind speed the last 24 hours on all these new quad weather stations, which are a part of the traditional setup we have. So thank you.